Hello, my name is RaChelle Schmidt, and I am the Artistic Associate and Idea Manager at Portland Center Stage at the Armory. On behalf of the IDEA team, I would like to welcome you all to our panel discussion, Productive Discomfort, Idea in Portland Theater. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to say that we at Portland Center Stage acknowledge that the Portland metropolitan area rests on the traditional village sites and summer encampments of numerous tribes who made their home along the Columbia and Willamette rivers. Today, Portland's diverse and vibrant Native communities are 70,000 strong and descended from more than 380 tribes, both local and distant. We take this opportunity to offer respectful recognition to the many people of the river and their summer guests, and to the Native communities in our region today, Oregon tribes, and those who have stewarded the land throughout the generations. The PCS IDEA Team is a cross-departmental team that created the PCS IDEA guidelines that are designed to prevent and interrupt racism and oppression whenever it occurs in our community. And we are also now responsible for the accountability to those guidelines and for creating learning opportunities just like this one. We're so excited to be able to bring this discussion to the Fertile Ground Festival and to the Portland theater community. We're grateful for the amazing theater artists who are taking part in this very important discussion. The panel will be moderated by Ruby Joy White. Ruby uses Prince, she pronouns and is a stylish 30-something, sapphically inclined, writer, violinist, dancer, Sagittarius, tomboy, creative, based in Portland, Oregon. A radical imaginist, Ruby is a cultural curator and plans and executes creative events, arts talks, festivals, and curates installations that center people of color in all of their intersections. In addition to her creative endeavors, Ruby is a sociologist and has spent the last several years working in the realms of education, multicultural affairs, recruitment and curriculum development, climate assessment, journalism, youth engagement, and has recently transitioned to regional government with an equity and racial justice leadership role. Prince is active in Portland's creative arts scene and facilitates and moderates conversations on equity in creative spaces and artistic development. She is a content writer and an editor for Art and Ourselves, a copywriter, general editor, consultant for racial equity, queer equity, organizational structure, and strategic planning work. Prince also currently sits on the board of the Alberta Abbey Foundation. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ruby.
Thanks so much, RaChelle. I was having some problems finding my unmute button because we're all working from home. Zoom fatigue is real. I'm so excited to be here tonight. Thanks for that intro. Whenever I hear my bio, I always feel so awkward because it's really not like that. Like, let's calm down, right? It's so extra. I'm a Sagittarius, though. It's Sagittarius season, so I guess I can go ahead and lean into it a little bit. But we have some amazing, amazing panelists with us tonight. I'm super excited to engage in conversation with you all. And I'm familiar with so much of your work from a variety of the panelists here. I've seen some of you actually on stage as well, or seen some of your stage work too. And I know that you all will have some great, great content to deliver today during our conversation. But before we hop into our actual curated list of questions and all of that fun stuff, we need to get to know who our amazing panelists are. So I'm going to go ahead and name off one by one who our panelists are, have you all introduce yourselves and give us about a couple minutes of juicy content. Let us know what you do in the artistic scene, and also please do share your pronouns as well. Let's go ahead and start with Samson.
Hi everyone, my name is Samson Seheroth. I identify as a queer Laotian American and the son of refugees. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns. And I am the managing artistic director of Theater Diaspora, an Asian American Pacific Islander theater company committed to portraying authentic AAPI cultural, historical, and social perspectives. Theater Diaspora began as a project of Meteorites, where I'm still the associate producer alongside executive producer D-May Roberts, who co-founded Theater Diaspora with me. I also serve on the Portland Area Theater Alliance, or PATA board, as the chair of the EDI committee. And I also helped start the Accountability Collective, which is a best practices committee exploring and adapting new standards to address the concerns of Portland area theater professionals.
Thank you so much, Samson. And woo, you do a lot. Super can't wait to hear your responses tonight. All right, let's go ahead and kick it over to Keisha. And y'all, don't diminish what it is that you do. Lay it all out. I want the kind folks to know all the stuff that you are a part of. Please don't be modest tonight. Go ahead, Keisha.
Thank you. My name is Keisha Jarrett, she, her. I am at Artist Repertory Theater. I've been at Artist Rep for 4 years, which is the same timeline that I've been in Portland for. I am a writer and a director and an actor, an activist, and as far as Artist Rep along with PCS are both members of the League of Resident Theaters, and I serve on the LORT EDI committee, and very recently have been in charge of putting together a multitude of panels and discussions circulating around the We See You White American Theater document, as well as those theaters that don't have any sort of accountability measures that are put into place, with also talking about that. I'm a storyteller, so I've won the MOP Grand Slam twice, told stories at Backstage, Back Fence, and with Artist Rep we are putting together these moments of content creation during COVID called Mercury Companies, and we put together a new program was born out of that, and our first devised piece is a theater piece that is about just 3 Black people living in Portland during the time of COVID, but it was filmed entirely with a BIPOC production team, and that is something Portland is not used to, so it was great to do, and we did that with the support of Corner and Open Signal and Gearhead. So yeah, that's where I am.
Well, sheesh. Do you even sleep? Also, fantastic actor. I've seen you act. You're amazing. Really big fangirl over here. So thank you so much for sharing everything with us. Let's go ahead and move over to Alec. Hi, Alec.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. My name is Alec Lugo. I use he, him pronouns, and I am a second-generation Latinx queer identifying artist here in Portland. I am the marketing manager at Bag & Baggage Productions, which is the largest arts organization, live performing arts organization in Hillsboro, Oregon. And I am also an ensemble member of Fuse Theater Ensemble, which is a predominantly queer-led small size theater here in Portland. I am an actor in my own right and an artist. I am also a marketing manager, media creator, graphic designer, videographer, dancer, singer. I like to watch TV, long walks on the beach. And and I also have been doing a lot of work externally through my own means that I can to be a part of this equity conversation that we are having within the theater art scene here in Portland. I am a part of a group that is working to address and develop positions that we hope to implement in the future. I don't think I can talk too much about what those positions are, but we are working towards creating something tangible. I, as an actor, try to advocate, and as an artist, try to advocate in the spaces that I inhabit for both myself and also for underrepresented communities and underrepresented voices that are in the room. I'm trying, when you need to speak on your things, it's just like, what else have I done? What else can I account for? I am, here's something I can talk about. I am also the recipient of a Spotlight Award from the Portland Grammy Awards for my work in media and marketing and conscientious marketing. And I also have an award from the Hawaii State Theater Council, where I'm from, for excellence in service, which I received back when I was just a wee teenager, but it still counts. And generally, this conversation about equity in theater is something that I've been having for a long time on one-on-one basis with those that I'm able to. As a person who is an artist of color, of mixed race, who identifies as queer, I often inhabit predominantly white spaces or institutions. And I recognize that my position as somebody who is either white presenting or mixed race offers opportunities for me to have and inhabit spaces that maybe do not feel welcome or open or available to those who come from underprivileged or underserved representations. And so I try to keep that in mind of the spaces that I inhabit when I inhabit them. Yeah, and that's kind of me. That's what I do.
Thank you. And wow, I'm impressed. Also, you just left out what your astrological signs are, but maybe we can get to that at the end. All right, last but not least, let's go ahead and hear from Chip.
Oh, hello. My name is Chip. I use they, them pronouns. I am a queer Black theater artist, also a double Pisces, Scorpio rising, a lot of water. I am currently the Associate Artistic Director at Portland Center Stage, which is a position I've held since July, but I've been with Portland Center Stage since April of 2019, which is when I moved to Portland. Before that, I was the Artistic Associate / Resident Director at Kansas City Repertory Theater for 7 seasons. And in my work there and here, I work primarily as a casting director and a producer and a director. I'm very interested in how do we elevate the voices of artists of color, how do we tell stories that haven't been able to be told, and how do we make our theater spaces, most of which have been historically white spaces, spaces that feel safe for everyone, spaces that feel like a place where all of us can tell our stories, all of us can hear our stories, and all of us can enjoy the space together, because I think the reason we make art is because we have stories that are important, that need to be told, and what a gift to be able to be a part of telling them. I'm not as fancy as all of y'all, so my thing is short, but
no, that was very fancy. That was very, very fancy. Thank y'all so much. Wow, like I feel like I should just hop off this call. You all don't need me. Like you already know what you want to talk about. It's like fine. I do want to mention one thing too. I have deep respect and gratitude to Portland Center Stage at the Armory, because I've been curating post-show talks for the last like almost 2 years now, specifically with those plays that center folks of color. So I really, really am grateful to be here in this space, because PCS feels like a piece of my heart. And it's just lovely that we're able to do this right now. Before we hop into things, I definitely want to go ahead and give space to the collective exhaustion or the collective trauma that we might all be experiencing now being 9.5 months into this global pandemic. And so I just want to thank you all so much for taking the time to share this space with us today, even though I know what we're going through has been pretty heavy and specifically has impacted our industry the hardest, I want to say, apart from like, you know, the service industry, et cetera, but the arts have been greatly impacted. So thank you for showing up as your best selves today. And so with that being said, I believe the first question that I kind of want to lean into, and you all can popcorn around, there's no specific order in this, is how has the pandemic impacted your organization's equity work, anti-racist work, et cetera? And how have you found ways to possibly pivot during this truly, and I hate this word because it's being overused, but it is unprecedented, during these truly unprecedented times when we're not allowed to actually gather in the spaces the way that we usually do. And I'll leave some space for you all to go ahead and think about that, and whoever feels compelled to speak first, go ahead.
Somebody's got to go first. I'll go first. So I think that one of the biggest pivots that Artist Rep has done that I alluded to in my introduction is these periods of content creation that we're calling Mercury Company. And the first one started with our PPP loan. And so in the month of June, we hired 52 artists to work on 12 different projects. And right before that happened, May 25th was the video of George Floyd being murdered. And then 2 days later was the video of Christian Cooper took of Amy Cooper, who was saying that she was going to call the cops and say that a black man was harassing her in the park. And then I had a conversation with our director of new work and also with our artistic director, Indamisa Rodriguez, and just asked if anybody was a part of this company. Like, we had all these writing rooms and, you know, what we were doing. Like, is anybody talking about this, talking about what's happening in the world right now, talking about Black Lives Matter, writing about it, thinking about it, how does it affect theater? And then the answer was no. And I was like, well, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't do anything. And so they came back with, well, do you want to write it? And I was like, no. We decided that what we would do is take all of the Black artists that were involved in the original Mercury Company and just bring us together. It was called the Untitled Response Project because I didn't want to take the responsibility of naming something that was truly supposed to be something that was a divisive thing, and we didn't know what that thing was. And the first thing that we did was come together and say how tired we were of giving a response to what was happening. We were response overloaded. And on top of that, how great it was just to be in a space that was of just BIPOC people. So you don't have to code switch. You don't have to like be polite. You can just say and explain all your frustration, and everybody is already aware of all those multitudes of levels that you go through just being a BIPOC person that's like consistently being talking about this. And so we decided to call it Oxygen, and Oxygen, or the group Oxygen, and that's in honor of the many Black people who have died, with their last words being, "I can't breathe." And the biggest thing that we just said was like, man, it would be great if we could just do something that was just slice of life. How many white shows are there, or how many TV shows, or how many movies are there of just slice of life of a white person? And that's fine, but we have to carry this banner and this rock and heavyweight of being the representative of our culture in all things. And so we moved on from that into the evolution of Mercury 2. And so with Mercury 2, we decided that we were going to make a short film, and we called it See Me, and we devised it and wrote it and hired all of the creative team and cast and filmed it in a 6-week time frame. And finding film people before you have a script is not the typical way that it's done. We did this in the traditional structure of devising. And the biggest thing from that has been, look at what we can do. Like it was just with a little bit of money, just a little bit of startup cash, and like, look at what we can do. And, you know, we're going to premiere the short at the Portland International Film Festival. So we have like an end date with that. But ultimately what it's really done is Oxygen not only is a place for us to generate BIPOC work, but it's also a place that in which we were like, we don't have enough BIPOC people that are in creative teams. We don't have enough BIPOC people that are lighting designers or scenic designers or costume designers. Poor Wanda Walden. You know, so like, so we want to be that place. And so part of Oxygen is also going to have a one mentor-mentee production a year in which the entire creative team will be BIPOC, and then the entirety of that creative team will also have mentees, all of which are also BIPOC, to hopefully like be able to raise up some more people in the creative capital in the production design aspect. But also, that's great for Artist Rep, I'm not gonna lie, but what it also does is it creates a difference in the theatrical landscape in Portland, right? Like it changes the ecology, it changes the way that it looks, it changes the ease in which people continuously go back to the same people over and over again because it's your easy pool, it's your easy pocket. You know, another thing that is a hidden blessing in COVID has been a lot of this work has been a lot of transparency and openness. Did we have to lay off some people? Absolutely. Was that horrible? Absolutely. It's really focused on the 10 people that we have left on staff, full-time staff at Artist Rep. We are overly taxed and you know, and have a lot of work to do, but we are all we also believe in the mission and what Artist Rep is doing right now, that and we work collaboratively and we are transparent in things and open in things, like our weekly staff meeting, which never would have happened in this particular setting before, in which like everybody knows the same amount. There's not this sort of trickle down of like, oh, well, nobody told me. So, you know, that's up to you to read your notes if you weren't able to come to the Monday staff meeting. The other thing that I would say is we have transitioned from using equity, diversity, inclusion into using anti-bias, anti-racist. And I believe that that is a good step. EDI has in particular come to be a nice way, of a palatable way for white colleagues, white board members, white audiences to hear diversity. And that's the only thing that they hear. And usually that diversity means black and white and not like, not any other type of diversity. And so let's just name it. And so what we're naming is there's an anti-bias and anti-racist work that we're doing within our theater, and we're naming it that. And so if people have an issue with that, then let's talk about the issue as far as like, nobody said that you particularly are racist, but this structure is racist. And we are going to like move ahead with dismantling that structure. And then, you know, some of the best advice I've gotten since this has happened is that I called a colleague when I was starting to feel burnt out. And, you know, at Artist Rep, so since February, we've launched a new website that I'm responsible for, created new branding with a new creative firm, launched a new creative generating model, had a first run of press, now a second run of press, communicated production cancellations, launched a new subscription model, communicated a canceled gala, coordinated a virtual paddle raise in 2 days, acted as the EDI manager, and then because of COVID layoffs, as of July 1st, I gained a development department. So fixing this problem isn't for Keisha to solve. Keisha doesn't have time to solve that. Also, racism doesn't benefit Keisha. I am a brown person. It does not benefit me. So I can be helpful in pointing out the inequities and problematic behavior as it appears, but the work really has to be done by white colleagues, white board members, white audience members, and the most amazing thing is that leadership at Artist Rep has heard that and they've been responsive to that. So I've really gotten the autonomy to say those things in public, say those things in a public forum, and be heard and backed up on it.
Yes to all of that. Yes to all of that. And also thank you for pointing out how EDI, DEI, IDEA, however we're saying it, have been really comfortable pockets for folks to be able to access diversity or to be able to say, yeah, no, I'm involved with anti-racist work, especially within the arts sector, right? Because what I'm seeing too is kind of what you're saying with all the rebranding that's going and, you know, organizations having to pivot so quickly and DEI being the center of it, it just seems titular. And so I would love to hear from the rest of the panelists, like what kind of strategies your organizations have been making, taking in order to pivot that and to truly, truly center anti-racist work.
I'll go next. Also, like, yes, just to affirm everything Keisha said, because wow. And also, like, I think it's one of the things that has been really interesting about this moment for me is being a new person in Portland and a new person at PCS. I was just shy of a year when the pandemic hit and I was actually furloughed. So I was at home for 2 months and then joined back up on the team in May. And so to see what a different existence it is, being in this mode during COVID, being in these Zoom meetings, being in these panels, being in all these conversations, and the way in which so much of it is centered on the computer, so much of it is centered on this media that we shared, that the piece that began so many of the conversations that we're having now is that video of George Floyd, and how our worlds have become this digital non-tangible thing. And so it's so frequently having conversations at cameras. And also the gift of that is, I think it cuts out the bullshit. We don't really have time to sit and do greetings because we want to get into like, what is the meat of this? And one of the things about PCS is that we had started our IDEA team in the fall of 2019, really with the idea of looking at the interaction between our audience and the way in which audience members interacted with our BIPOC staff, particularly our front of house staff and other BIPOC audience members. And what happened was when we started having these conversations about anti-racism work in a much larger sphere, all of them fell into the idea bucket. And so what's been interesting is to see, like, one thing can't be a catch-all for everything. We cannot say all of the problems of race can be solved by this team that we're putting into place at a theater, because ultimately you can't solve all of the problems with racism without buy-in from everyone. Like racism will not change until everyone has bought in. And that is particularly hard in the theater because we love building narrative. That's what we do. And so to build a narrative around it, to say that we are making the steps forward, even if it's not necessarily the biggest steps forward. But one of the big gifts to us was the ground we stand on, we see you white American theater demands, because that list is exhaustive. It is 39 pages that if you had a question of how do you make the American theater a less racist place, just go there and you can begin. And for PCS, what we've really done is we started with all staff meetings, and everyone on the staff, there are now about 30 of us on staff, each week would go and discuss each of the bullet points on it, particularly the ones focused at the regional theater, and discuss how can we as an organization, first, what are we doing as an organization? Let's take stock of where we are. Let's say, who are we? And then what is achievable, and what is achievable on a timeline? Let's begin saying, what can we do immediately? What can we do in a year? What can we do in 5 years? And start having those conversations with the full staff in the hopes of gaining full staff buy-in. there are several things that we have already been able to commit to that you can find on the PCS website. But I think the work is to build on that list, to build on how do we, as an organization, be a thought leader in terms of what best practice in the theater is. I think one of the things that we had a really depthful conversation about was, at the beginning of this, what are our best resources? What are our most usable resources in this moment where all of us have cut our budgets? None of us are having people coming to our space. We don't have income in that way anymore. So what are the resources that a theater company has? Fortunately for PCS, we do have a building that is ours. And so saying, how can we make space for other theater companies that may not have space, that particularly BIPOC theater led theater companies? We did our open lobby. We did to allow for anyone protesting to come and use the bathroom and charge their phone. We've used our building for mutual aid, as well as trying to have a commitment to supporting BIPOC artists, as well as all artists, but particularly BIPOC artists in this moment. And thinking about one of the programs we created is our Original Works program, which was launched with our Community Voices project, which allowed 12 Black artists in this city to make whatever they wanted. It was a micro commission to say, what is the piece of art you want to make right now? And please share it with us so that we can use our network to promote it, and then expand that CVP, Community Voices project, out to say, who are other artists that we can promote? Who are people who we just want to say, what do you want to say? What is the art that you want to make? Because I think one of the barriers so frequently in the art scene is that you don't get to make the art you want to make. There are a very select few people who have power who get to say, like, this is the project I want to make, this is the thing I want to make, and let's do it. But so much of it happens with someone else is doing something and I want to be a part of it, and how do I get to be a part of it? So something that felt really important was, let's just say, what do you want to make, and make space for that. And that has led into our Original Works program, where we are trying to devise pieces that respond to the here and now and feel like they are having these depthful conversations about race, about gender, about identity, about what it is to be alive in 2020, December 14th, like what it is to have tracked through this 9-month journey that is not over, and to the overlap between what it is to be at home because of COVID and what it is to feel the weight of the racial reckoning that is happening, because you can't not engage with it. If you aren't engaging with it, you're not going to be able to move forward, because the only way forward is through it, through deep engagement, understanding, questioning, and growth.
Yes. That's all I can say is yes. I'm so glad this is recorded so I can watch it again later. Samson, Alec, would you all like to contribute to this?
Sure. I love hearing about all of this. And what's really great is that every organization is different. And so to see the pace at where everybody is going, that everybody is kind of doing this work, is really great. I work for several different organizations, and with PATA, like they're still in the process of doing the change, but they're working on it. We have an EDI committee that is growing. It's now a majority BIPOC committee, and over half of us are queer or genderqueer. And yeah, I'm just really excited to see that growth. And it's interesting because there's the question of like, why are you doing this work now? But I know for theater diaspora and media rights, we've been doing this work for years. We've just in 2018, we started doing POC only workshops to really build community and build the, like Keisha said, like trying to change the landscape of our theater community. And really the community building and having mentors and mentees are really important. Yeah, and starting the Accountability Collective, we have been doing these POC town halls, which even at our first one, just being able to see each other on screen, even though it's on screen and we're all social distancing, seeing each other and being able to connect it brought us joy. And I think focusing on joy right now is really important. A lot of times, Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color are portrayed in majority white institutions where our trauma is honestly fetishized. And I think we need to be seen as three-dimensional people. We need to see all of us. We need to see our joy for this work to be substantial.
Yeah, as the person who's speaking last on this panel of the four of you have spoken, I just echo and appreciate everything that you have said. It's filling my heart up in such a way that I'm like, can I talk right now? And I will, and I am. And I think with Chip, on what you said about when the George Floyd video was circulated and when the news about Breonna Taylor was coming out and other instances of Black bodies being harmed and Black people being targeted, that sparked a massive, massive conversation across many different institutions. And specifically within here in Portland, we were the epicenter of a giant protest that had the nation's eyes on it. And we knew that as arts institutions in this town and in these counties, there was no way that we could possibly have ignored it in the ways that we believe, like the We See White American Theater document, which is a beautiful, very generous gift for institutions across the United States and even across the world. We knew that at Bag and Baggage, for example, that there was something there that we needed to take even further. And specifically in the sense that as a predominantly white institution, we knew that although we had been striving to do this work and we have been doing it on and off for years, we had a desire to want to push discussing about diversity and equity. We knew that we were not putting in the effort that was necessary at the rate that we believe that needed to be done. And so specifically when the We See a White American Theater document came out and when the Black Lives Matter movement was surging, we knew that there was an opportunity for us to take time and really figure out what needed to be done on a grander scale. Specifically when the pandemic hit, Bag and Baggage had to cancel its production of The Measure of Innocence by Anya Pearson, local playwright, incredibly talented. And also it was unfortunate that we had to cut that production short. The Measure of Innocence was a commission project by our program called the Problem Play Project. Try saying that 5 times fast. Which was a project that was designed to commission local playwrights of color to adapt Shakespeare's problem plays to focus on a contemporary lens on racial issues of today. And that was the second project commission, Problem Play Project commission, the first being a project from Carlos and Trujillo called The Island in Winter, or La Isla en Invierno. And the Problem Play Project served as a lot of our gateway into wanting to do equity work. But we knew that it wasn't enough. And so it was unfortunate when that project got cut. It also served as a jumping point for us because it was the last show that we had done. We were all very concerned with the state of theater in the world and with the pandemic happening. But I believe that it was also the perfect place for us to look forward from and realize what we had done well, what we can continue to do, the mistakes that we need to own up to and honor, and also the ways in which we haven't done those things in the past. We recognize that as a predominantly white institution, we just likely were not doing that work, and not even likely we weren't. There were things that we needed to improve on and that we've needed to own up to. And the wake-up call that was the June and July shocked all of us and took us all into a state of pause where we actually needed to take like 2 weeks off and not do anything and kind of come back to it and say, okay, now we need to figure out where we go from here. What does our programming look like? What do we want to say through our channels? What can we do? And so in that, we have continued to produce and make programming that is no longer homogeneously white. We're inviting Black, Indigenous, people of color voices into our spaces to have say and leeway and gravitas, and add that to the room when we develop our programming. We also introduced a new segment, which we cleverly at Bag and Baggage called Unpacking the Baggage, where we produced a series of programming where our artistic leaders and other volunteers, artistic individuals from our organization, we would collectively view with our audiences, with our patrons, a piece of media that we felt was either reflective of the times or approached dismantling white supremacy in our culture, and then we would talk about it. And we tried to have these programming sessions every 2 weeks or so, understanding that one of the biggest things that we as a predominantly white institution could do to dismantle those things was to just look inside ourselves and say, how can we create a more equitable culture that makes it so that people want to be having these conversations with us, and so that we're no longer trying to sit and try to find the ways to be equitable. We need to dismantle and unpack those things in ourselves before we can just ask people to come into our culture and feel safe. And so with all of us sort of working on a part-time schedule, that's all of us, the 6 full-time staff members at Bag and Baggage went down to a part-time, and we've been trying to do all of this on a part-time. So Keisha, I hear you on the, oh my gosh, we have so much to do, and we've all had to pick up so much. But it's also been difficult in this time because so many have used it as a means to say, well, we can't produce anything. We can't do anything about it, and kind of leaving it at that. And we know that here in Portland, that's just not an option. We were in the thick of it, seeing it outside our windows and in the news every day. And we knew that there was no way that we could possibly avoid it and not use the excuse of we're just sort of incubating for it to come back. And I've been seeing a lot of the work that many of the people in here, their theater companies that they work with, the organizations that they work with, been doing that work in a way that I haven't seen necessarily, not necessarily in like above other places, but certainly in this microcosm of theater. It's been really pleasant to see and inspiring.
Before we move on to a different question, there's a couple of things I just wanted to pick up on, which was the We See You White American Theater document, in terms of it being packaged and put out, is, I would just like to state that that is thousands and thousands of dollars of free consultation that theaters are getting for free. I'm not saying that any of these, the theaters that are on this panel, but there are theaters that are in the world that have dismissed that document. And I think that that is a lot of just a baseline of just, again, the erasure of the energy and work and time and commitment and thought that Black and Indigenous and other people of color have put into that document to make it known, into like all of these other sort of like, well, let's write this over here and let's write this over here. And all of that is great, but it all essentially is coming from that document. So like just putting that out there and saying that is one thing. Two is, it's always super hard for me, even though I know that I do, it is super hard for me as a Black woman to consistently say that I work in a predominantly white institution. It is correct, but it's also this sort of like this odd push and pull, and I can only imagine that everybody on this call feels that, which is just that you're talking about equity, you're talking about diversity, you're talking about like accessibility and bringing in and all this stuff, and it's like that is second nature to us. That is unspoken to us. And what is hard about it, what is time sensitive, what is sensitive with her, what puts on all of that emotional labor, is the fact of like us saying it over and over and over and over and over again, and it's still being met with, when we are talking about a shared space and about bringing or inviting BIPOC community members, the reason why it's not a shared space isn't just because of a physical representation of who people see in their lobby spaces. It's also just in the act of treatment of just appearing nearby the building, and wonderful ushers and wonderful staff people, but at the same time, unaccustomed to seeing people that look like me, that look like Samson, that look like Alec, look like Chip, like hanging out in the theater. They know me, but when I first started at Artist Rep, right, like, and I can say cone of silence, that, you know, when I first started working at Artist Rep, it was like I'd been there maybe 2 months, like, so not that long. And I came in and somebody like was like, do you need some help? And I was like, well, no, I'm just going to go like do this. And it's like, well, hold on, I should talk to you about that first, and like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, my bag is actually in my office. Like, I literally work here. So I think that is also a piece of it where we can invite people from the BIPOC community into our space all the time. And if that is how they are treated, then I would also become distrustful of stepping into that space. So, you know, this sort of comeuppance of all of these BIPOC people that are being put into, and I'm not meaning you specifically, Chip, but all these like people that are being put into these associate artistic director positions that happen to be BIPOC. It's like, we've been here. Like, this isn't, we're not a surprise to like, to the people that we have been working around. Like, we're here. But what's unfortunate is that there's a lot of what I view as there's the person that's going to get all of the diversity for us. And if we just shove them into this role, that can happen. And what it really takes is those institutions to do the internal work to do that, and not have the internal work being led by your BIPOC staff members, in order for that to happen, where it's not traumatic for your staff members, plus you have organic community relationships that you can fall back on when you make your spaces open. So I just wanted to sort of state that, because I think each person said something and I was like, ooh.
Can I piggyback on that a little bit? Because
yeah.
I think what you are saying, Keisha, so perfectly lines up to this idea of exceptionalism that happens with BIPOC members of staff, where like, I am asked to bring my Blackness to every room in a way that is both like, yes, the thing that informs everything, but like it is not a burden to bring my Blackness into the room, because it is my Blackness. It is my life. But it becomes a tool for other people's learning in a way that a white person's whiteness is not something that they have to bring in to offer as a tool. And it is an expectation that is so frequently put on BIPOC artists, BIPOC administrators, to come into a room and say like, okay, now that I'm here, I will solve your diversity problem, because obviously in this body, I understand all diversity problems, which is not the case. But is this really tricky thing that suddenly, I think when you get into these institutions, a lot of artists and administrators of color can take on that feeling of, oh, I'm supposed to fix it. Like, I am here to fix it. I'm the one who's going to connect everything. I'm the one who is going to make this organization better and less racist in my own body. And that is an impossibility, because it's a team effort. It requires everyone to buy in, and it can't be this exceptional, like the idea of the exceptional Negro coming in and teaching all the white people.
Can I also chime in? I remember reading this quote, and I'm gonna butcher it, but it says, you can't expect to bring a person of color into a broken system to fix it, and not expect to change it. Instead, you will break the person and the system will go unchanged.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like as a person who has been in so many historically white institutions and historically white creative spaces, even like curating shows inside art galleries is still very white in the way in which you have to go about doing it. I often find exactly what you all had said about the burden still just falling down on us, because it's like, oh no, but look, we have this person here. And so their role becomes titular, but also their role becomes, no, we've solved our diversity, equity, inclusion issues. And so with that being said and that in mind, you all have brought up the We See You White American Theater document several times now. And so I'm kind of going to morph a couple of questions because I feel like you all are going to have some juicy responses to it. So the first one would be, how did your organization receive that document? Like, how did it sit with them? How did it land with them? How has your organization utilized that document to change the organization in general, its very runnings, its logistical standpoints, etc.? And then lastly, how has your organization, through the guidance of that specific framework, been, I want to say, putting in Black, Indigenous, Asian, Pacific Islander, Latinx, etc., all folks of color, how have they been able to center those voices and actually institute policy that allows folks of color to have that creative agency? And so it's kind of like a three-parter. So how do you utilize the document? How did they receive the document? And how have folks of color been placed in strong positional areas where they're able to influence what creative work comes out of an organization?
I guess I'll start and say, I think as a company, we received it as a gift and as something that, like, as Keisha was saying, it is thousands of hours of free labor and instruction and guidance into what is wrong with these institutions and what has long been wrong. And it is pointing out the problem in such specific ways that you can't look at it without, like, I think that part of the reaction is, this is me, and you can either engage and change or you push it away. And I think that's what we've seen happen. And I think PCS saw it as a gift, and we said, how do we engage further with this? How do we let this tell us who we are? And part of that was, well, we have to open it up to our full staff, and we have to begin having those conversations. It also has to happen at the board level, and beginning to have those conversations and continuing to have those conversations with who is on the board, what is that board makeup, what story does that tell? And I think that there is a long road for our organization to continue to not only engage with what's there, but repair harm and say, like, what has this institution historically been, and how do we say this is who we want to be in the future? This document feels like just the path forward of, do you have a question about that? Well, let's change it. I think we have committed to saying that half of our artists are going to be BIPOC artists going forward, which was already something that we were trying to make happen and we're working towards, and we will continue to work towards. And I think that in saying, who are your lead artists? Who are your designers? Who are your actors? Who are your directors? Who are your writers? Who are the people that you are hiring to make up the bulk of the work that is the most forward-facing part of your organization? And how do you say, these are the stories that we want to tell, these are the voices we want to center, and while doing it, how do you make your space, your company, a place where those artists can come in and feel empowered to be the art makers that they are? You are not hiring them to come and make the art you want them to make. You are hiring them to come and make the art that they make. And so how do you not gatekeep that? How do you not allow the perceptions and the identity of an organization and what it has been to stand in the way of the artists whom are the future of the organization? And so I think that that's been the big learning, is to continue pushing forward of, who are we centering? Who and how do we continue to center those people? And how do we also continue to say that it's not just the work on stage, and it's not just the people in those casts and the people making the art? Because I think it often comes down in these conversations of, we talk so much as organizations about how do we make the lives of BIPOC artists better, but it doesn't often trickle down to how do we make the lives of BIPOC theater workers better as a whole. And so I think deepening that conversations of talking about, for PCS, the 6-day work week, and committing to eliminating the 6-day rehearsal week, and how that change not only affects the actors and the artists in the room, but the whole company. Because if you're working a 6-day work week, that's likely going to fall on the lowest paid employees, who are often where in most organizations there is the greatest grouping of BIPOC employees. And so how do we continue to say it is not just the work on stage, but giving a voice to all of the BIPOC staff members and saying, your experience is an important one and one that should affect the future of this organization.
I just want to make sure that I heard or that I remember the question correctly, which is view, utilize, and then relationship. Does that sound like a marker? Okay. So there's a couple of things, right? Like, is that that we are going through we did go through the WCU document line by line, and looked at adapting it to fit something of an organization within our budget size. Like, so what things are talking specifically to us, what things are things that we can change, what things are this, like, and so I think in that, like, that was great, along with just it's just about the acknowledgement of the mistakes or what you have been doing that is incorrect or that could change to make it equitable. And so just even putting up, right, like your anti-racist statement on your website, acknowledging, like putting up your numbers, counting your numbers, it is not out there to go out there for people to have a ha gotcha like moment. It's just a way for, like, when you have to go through that work of just acknowledging how little your institution is doing, and you can be aces on stage but nil anywhere else, and it doesn't matter. It gives you that same number. So I think that has been really great, like in a pathway for us to move forward. I think that Artist Rep, had a lot of start and stops on doing this work before I got there 4 years ago. And what I find to be interesting in particular about this and what this has really done, which is that we keep reframing it and saying, like, the work, right? And so, but a lot of it is that the work is not defined for people. And so that's what this document did, is it defined the work. It gave you an explanation of what that is. So when somebody's like, I don't know what to do, and it's like, here's 39 pages that you can look at to tell you what you can do. So like, it's that. And I would say that for myself, for utilizing that document, one thing that changed within me is just how I have been complicit in allowing for a lot of that behavior to continue within my own organization by not saying something, by letting microaggressions proceed without raising my voice, with letting white fragility proceed and exist in meeting spaces where I'm like, oh, well, I can't get into it with them because, like, it's going to blah, 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 blah. And since that document came out, since our organization has talked about it, we previously to the shutdown, to George Floyd being killed, we had already hired an outside HR consultant to help us with our handbook, to help us go through culture surveys, and help us through focus groups. So they've been integral in helping us really shift the mindset in terms of, like, even there's the basic architecture setup of how to change that organizationally. But really a lot of that change is we're talking about this specific moment in time. And I can't imagine I'm the only person that's had this conversation, which is like, this feels different to me. When George Floyd died and the protests that started happening across the country felt different. And I don't know whether it's because we were all locked down and we had been making banana bread 2 days before, you know what I mean? Like, and then it became this of like, where's the sourdough starter? Like, and then it was we had a real thing happen. But I wasn't alive then, but I can only imagine that this is what it was like in the 60s, of just like the civil rights movement is what I feel like we're having. And not only is that, but like, not only are we marching for lives, because like I'm like everybody else, right? Like, I am tired of a hashtag, and I for sure don't want to end up a hashtag. I don't want my brother to end up a hashtag. I don't want my dad or my nephew to end up one. And we cover the gamut. Like, we are the United Covered of Benetton, my family. So like, there's a large contingent of us that just we look different. We look different than white. But that's not something to say that like, that the fragility that has been allowed to continue has been prevalent in the institutions to not allow them to change, to be a stalwart for change, and to prevent the quickness that can happen with change. Because we often view time as a measure of white supremacy. Like, it's just one of those things. But look at how quickly things are done if it is about a white person. And yet, like, when we talk about making things more equitable, making things where more BIPOC people are moved into your organizations, that's like, oh, we got to take the time to like make sure all the board's okay, make sure all of this is okay. And I'm like, well, what's the difference? If we can be lightning quick over here, we can be lightning quick over here. And I'm not saying like don't think about it as a whole, but like there is a way for us to utilize that time mechanism and have us move forward, use the momentum that's going on with the country, keep us on pace with the country, and actually use the arts for what it's intended to, which is like, what do we envision the country to be? What do we envision the best world to be? Because that's who we are. We are art makers. We are change makers. We put that forward. So like, if we can't do that, then like we are way behind, like way more behind than I think we are.
Okay, I'll follow that up. I'll take that that duty. Oh my God.
I know. I was like, phew.
Yeah. Oh wow. Okay. There's so much that document provided that is a roadmap. I really appreciate what you said, Chip, and what you said, Keisha, about that is a roadmap. People often complain all the time that there is just, we don't know what to do. We brought in a person of color to help us with diversity, and it didn't work. They left. They were angry. We brought in more actors of color to fill our stages. We told a Black story. We brought in Latinx Spanish-speaking performers to tell this story, and then they left, and those are one-off things. And it happens in all other sort of facets of how you can identify. We did a queer show. We did a show that starred a trans person. We did a show that starred a deaf person. That's all well and good, and those are stories that need to be told, and I'm glad that we tell them. The problem is that oftentimes organizations, because we are theaters and because we are trying to tell, sometimes the issue is that we want to cover a wide breadth of things. Sometimes it's like we see it as a chore or something that's like, we don't know how to accomplish these things. The We See White American Theater document gives us those tangible steps, and not just right now in the moment. It's not just putting up mission statements. It's not just doing anti-racist work. It's not just reading the Ibram X. Kendi book. It's also 5-year plans. It's 10-year plans. It's literal roadmaps for how you can accomplish these things. It is something that is sort of, it almost feels as if though, I was talking with someone a while back that said, it feels as if though this document has been developed over years and not just something that came out recently. And I told them, I was like, well, it kind of has been developed over years, like over generations, like over hundreds of years of a very problematic country coming to its own experimental fruition. And it feels as if though that kind of shock is indicative of white America, of white culture, of just like, how could this happen? Where did this happen? In 2016, when Trump got elected, like people were like, how could that possibly happen? And I'm like, what do you mean, how could it happen? This is entirely what was meant to happen. It is not a surprise anymore. So in June and July, when the George Floyd videos were circulating, when the news about Breonna Taylor happened, people were shocked again. And this time, I think specifically white folks, and even folks who are complicit, I don't want to say white folks, I want to say people who were complicit in it, finally we're done with the shock. There was enough of them that were done with the shock and wanted to try and do something. And then here comes the We See You White American Theater document. It gives you tangible actions. It takes the guilt and turns it into activism. It turns it into emails you can send. It turns it into guidelines and standards and plans. And you know what else it did for a lot of people that I know, and for myself as well? It turned into healing. It turned into an opportunity for the BIPOC people of artistic institutions to feel empowered, that the things that they have been talking about and the things that they have felt are not just things that they should clear aside anymore. And for white folks of institutions, for those who have positions of privilege, it meant that they had to start listening. And the pandemic provided a perfect groundwork. Unfortunately, in a lot of ways, the pandemic was exactly what this kind of an uprising needed. It needed people to not be working 8 hours a day just to get by. It needed people to be stuck in their homes doing nothing but paying attention to the news. It needed people to be so in such a low place, I hate to say it that way, but in such a low place that they needed this in order to push them to wanting it. And I know for me in my institution, it's been incredibly powerful. As one of the only BIPOC individuals in the institution and the only BIPOC on staff, I have felt more empowered to speak up in staff meetings. I felt more empowered to take leadership positions in my organizations and in my circles that I inhabit, not just those within professional work settings. And it's given me more of a chance to thrive in artistic institutions. And it will in the future when I potentially move on to other venues or other places. And it has also taken that end of it and met it up with this end of it, which is to finally get people who I've been yelling at or who I have been silently seething at to listen and to pay attention and to provide that space. And I think someone else said it earlier in this panel discussion, it requires everyone to be playing. And that's what I think the document did. It made everyone want to play. And in some unfortunate way, it also weeded out the people who had no interest in paying attention whatsoever. Now that they had instructions, now that they had the steps to do it, if they still decided not to listen or they still decided to leave the institution, it exposed them. And it made sure that we weren't wasting our time on trying to do something that was like trying to punch a brick wall. And that has begun an incredible healing process, I know, for many of my friends who are BIPOC, myself, and has also begun a very important step of education for those in institutions. So much of this work is personal, and sometimes it takes just sitting in a quiet space for 3 hours and reading this document or How to Be an Anti-Racist and trying to internalize that before you can move on to the ways in which you impact it in your institution, in the places where you work, in the places that you inhabit.
I'll go last. I know as the Accountability Collective, as we were first starting off with our meetings, the document came out and we read it and we were like, yes. And we came up with our own demands. We saw it as inspiration, not only in the institutions, but personally. We felt seen, we felt reflected. And I know for me as an individual, it not only gave me the power to speak up, but to actually leave places that I didn't think deserved me. And so, yeah, I'll keep it short.
Okay, so remember at the beginning when I was like, this is going to be a lot of juicy content. I feel like this conversation could go for, I don't know, another week. But unfortunately, we're limited on time and we have a pretty hard stop in about 10 minutes. And so I just want to go ahead and a more open, flowy question that more so has to do with where do we go now? And what do you all, within your identities, within your positionalities and your organizations, where do you see the work turning now? And how can we put that power into the bodies and movements of folks of color leading creative equity work?
Super simple to answer, obviously. I think that so many of us are eager to get back to doing what it is that theater institutions do, which is produce work. And I know that we have found substitutions for doing the work that we find so important. Many of us have produced something either on video or digitally, or we've written something and posted it somewhere. We've updated logos and websites, and we've tried to do the work to put people into positions of power where those changes can be made. We are beginning to commission artists to come back to contracts and say, we have a feeling now that a vaccine has been announced for the COVID-19 virus, and hopefully it works. People are starting to gear up to get ready for producing work again. And so I know for sure at Bag and Baggage, we have a work that we have been very excited to commission that we're coming back with called Troy USA, which is a part of our Problem Play project. And it will be the first project that we produce when we are able to produce work safely. And putting in place that groundwork for when we come back, we want to be able to use this as a springboard to do more of this, and to build our audience and to build a new community in our institution. We understand that there's a lot of unpacking and dismantling that needs to happen before we can just invite people like that into our culture and into our space, before that they feel welcome and they feel safe there. And we know that there is a lot of that work ahead of us. But we know that when we come back, we know exactly where we're starting, and we know exactly what we want to do and who we want to work with. And we're trying to just internalize that. And a lot of that internalizing is just kind of taking each day at a time and seeing what is necessary from day to day for those in our institution, outside our institution, in our community who need that space.
Yeah, I think this is the perfect time to stop, reflect, admit mistakes, and do better. I would love to see more centering of Black, Indigenous, and people of color stories with our voices, our production teams with BIPOC members. And I know with Theater Diaspora and Media Rights, we're remounting some of our ISM project plays, some of our monologues in video format, centering our monologue about Black tradeswomen negotiating the trials and tribulations of diversity training, and our monologue about a Black actress who experiences racial profiling here in Oregon, and then a monologue about a Central American mother who's separated from her daughter, sending her to the United States because she thinks that's where she can have a better life. And so I'd love to see more work like that, more work that PCS is doing and the Oxygen program is doing, and Bag and Baggage. Like, I think us, not to like put us on a pedestal, but like, I love the work that we're doing centering our voices.
It's fine. I already unmuted myself. So that is not a little question. So thank you for that in the last, so I'll try to make it 2 minutes long. I I wrote down some words that I have been missing, and so that is visceral connection and partnership, and I think that that's really how I'm choosing to live and thrive when we go back to having public assembly. I think that digital work will stay inclusive to the way in which we work as a theater company. Theater, the way it was pre-COVID, let's be honest, that's dead. That's not coming back in that same way. It's not. It just can't. So there's that. And, you know, the thing that brings me joy, the thing that is my heartbeat right now is there is a, when I first moved to Portland, I had several people ask me, why did I move to Portland? Because there's no Black people or there's no people of color here. And I just made a short where we hired 23 people, all of which were BIPOC, to make a short film. We have an oxygen company that is like 52 artists. And we're here. You know, I feel like it's the Horton Heroes of Who, like, sort of thing, like, we are here. So the problem is that we keep leaving Portland because we get exhausted. We are exhausted. We are tired. And so if this group can consistently grow to make it be less exhaustive so that people can stay in, God damn, it is good to be in this call with you, because that means you're here in Portland doing this work with me. Even if I don't see you every day, I know that you're here. And then my sign off is going to be, if you haven't seen the 40-year-old version by Rada Blank, it's on Netflix. Go watch it. It is an amazing film, and I think truly captures what it's like to be a BIPOC person and a BIPOC actress. And it's straight up truth. And I think that Portland in particular is a little bit ostrich in head in the sand when it comes to its own recognition of its failures as it comes to not just BIPOC acceptance, but in the diversity speak that we have and use, because we are progressive and city. But it is, I see that change right now, and I want it to continue. I want it to stay. I want that action. We got fatigued out at the early days of Trump. We were outraged so often that we had to take a nap. And I feel that outrage is still going on in it, but it's just focused. We're less focused on a Russia involvement with our government, and more focused on, like, how do we stop killing Black people in America? How does that happen? How do we stop killing the other people that fall line under, like, the melanin diaspora in America? How do we actually, like, help lift those bodies up and help dismantle racism in America? And so, like, if we can play a part in that, I'm aces for it.
I think that, like, one of the greatest gifts of being a theater maker and being able to have this as part of myself is that I have to use my imagination every day. And I think that that's so much a part of why anyone goes into the theater. And part of that work is to imagine what the world could be and to say, how do I reflect that in the work on stage? One of the things I've found the most inspiring about this year is this dismantling of hierarchies, and how we've seen in so many different spheres that the hierarchies that have existed are not necessarily the ones that will exist going forward. And for me, when I think about what is the art that has excited me this year, what has me leaned in, most of them are TikToks where like it is so democratized and it's just sort of like you can make anything. And when I think about like the fact that the theater has not existed as it once did in the 9 months ago, but that's true for all of the performing arts. And I think about the hierarchy that we've had of like, what is theater with a capital T and what is just like that. Ultimately, there's such an overlap between what a dancer does, what a musician does, what an actor does. Like we all have these skill sets that we've been put into these silos where we're told, you belong in this room, you belong in this room, you belong in this room, you belong in this room. And with that, you belong with this audience. And my hope is that as we start having these conversations and we start finding these connections of people who we never knew, it is to say, what is the future of the canon? The hierarchy of theater is such that says there's a canon of great plays that we are supposed to do, and who chose that canon, and what does that canon consist of? And so my hope is that we just say, we've done that canon. Let's move on. Let's move forward. Let's start making work that is more reflective of now. It's not to say we have to throw all of those plays in the garbage. Like, no, those plays do have value, but they have an untold value in the lens of the theater right now, that you're more likely to see a play that was written 100 years ago than you are to see a play that was written this week. And so how do we change that? Because we have so many talented living artists who are making art in new and exciting ways. So my hope is that we just make space for that. We make space for the work that is going to lead us into the future, that is going to change the minds, that is going to tell us this is possible.
Okay. Thank you all so much for everything that you've offered in this space, for your experiences, your expertise, your passion, your everything. I'm so bummed that we have to end. But I do really quick, because we do have a couple more minutes. Where can folks find y'all? And keep it brief. I know that you all are, thespians and you like to monologue. So let's go ahead and, she's just opening her mouth. So go ahead and keep it brief. But where can folks find you? Maybe if there's a website or social media that you would like to shout out really quick, so I can also follow you after this.
Artistrep.org.
Artistrep.org. Perfect.
PCS.org.
PCS.org.
Theaterdiaspora.org. That's R-E, not E-R.
Theaterdiaspora.org.
And then baggage.org. That's bag, the letter N, and then the word baggage.org.
Thank you for making that very clear. Thank you all so much.